Okay, now we will learn all about drugs affecting bone metabolism. So, in this diagram, this will show you the mechanisms of bone mineral homeostasis. No? So, the kidneys produce from a liver-derived precursor 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D, also known as calcitriol. And this process is stimulated by parathyroid hormone um, secreted by the parathyroid glands. No? Now, the bones also produce fibroblast growth factor 23 or FGF23, which inhibits renal production of calcitriol. Now, calcitriol in turn also regulates its own synthesis because it inhibits the production of parathyroid hormone by the gland, and it stimulates FGF23 release from bone tissues. No? We know that the calcitriol is the main regulator of intestinal calcium and phosphate absorption. Now, in the bone, both these hormones, parathyroid hormone and calcitriol, regulate the opposing processes of bone formation and resorption. They both are able to stimulate resorption and formation. Now, for bone formation, these two hormones are able to stimulate the production, proliferation, and maturation of pre-osteoblasts to osteoblasts, which are the main bone-forming cells. No? Additionally, parathyroid hormone also inhibits osteocytic release of sclerostin. No? Sclerostin is a protein that blocks osteoblast proliferation through inhibition of the WNT pathway. Uh, the two hormones also can stimulate the opposite process, which is resorption. No? And they do so by stimulating the expression of a substance called RANKL by the osteoblast. No? So RANKL stands for ligand for receptor for activation of nuclear factor kappa B. So RANKL is a substance that uh, together with the macrophage stimulating colony stimulating factor, MCSF, which is released from the bone marrow, stimulates the differentiation and activation of osteoclast. So rank L is for bone resorption. And PTH and calcitriol both stimulate the expression of rank L by the bone cells. No? Now, in excessive doses, FGF23 also is associated with the development of osteomalacia. This is a brittle bone condition which makes the person very prone to spontaneous fractures. Now, many tissues, including the bone cells, no, also produce a substance which we call OPG or osteoprotegerine. No? Now, OPG blanks rank L action, and therefore OPG expression is protective against bone resorption. PTH and calcitriol are inhibitory or inhibit OPG. No? Okay. Now, therefore, when we talk about regulation of serum levels of calcium and phosphate, there are three principal hormone regulators, no? The parathyroid hormone, calcitriol, and FGF23. No? And their effects on the serum levels of calcium and phosphorus will depend on their action on intestinal absorption of these two minerals, their action on renal, handling of these minerals, whether they are promotive of excretion or reabsorption, and also their action in terms of facilitating the outflow of calcium and phosphorus from bone into the serum, no, to raise blood levels of calcium and blood levels of phosphate, no? Okay. So now parathyroid hormone and calcitriol increases the outflow, no, or the transfer of calcium and phosphorus from bone depots into the serum, no, and thereby stimulate bone formation. Now, calcitriol also increases calcium and phosphate absorption from the gut. Now, in the kidneys, calcitriol will decrease. It will decrease the excretion of both phosphate and calcium, favoring the retention or reabsorption. Now, PTH in the kidneys will reduce calcium excretion, so it's pro-retention of calcium, but it will facilitate excretion or urinary loss of phosphate, no? Okay. Now, there are also secondary hormonal hormone regulators which have more modest effect on calcium and phosphate levels, no? And this is exemplified by calcitonin, no? But calcitonin, if given in exogenously, no, this can reduce serum calcium and phosphorus by inhibiting bone resorption and stimulating uh, renal excretion, no, of calcium and phosphorus, no? Now, these three main effects of parathyroid hormone, FGF23, and calcitriol, these effects may be modified by feedback mechanisms. No? For example, calcitriol increases urinary calcium indirectly through increased calcium absorption from the gut and also by inhibition of parathormone or parathyroid hormone. And can cause also an increase in urinary phosphate excretion indirectly because of increased phosphate absorption from the gut and also by stimulating FGF23 production, which, as I mentioned a while ago, FGF23 is promotive of renal excretion of phosphate. No? Now, this is the table that will summarize the effects of these three hormones on calcium and phosphorus, on bone resorption or bone formation. No? Additionally, calcium and phosphorus will also provide some feedback regulation. No? For example, calcium will suppress production of parathyroid hormone, whereas phosphorus will stimulate parathyroid hormone production as well as FGF23 secretion. Okay, so this is a list of the secondary hormone regulators, and as you see, there's quite a number of them. We will only emphasize on the three which are highlighted. You just read the others on your own. No? And as mentioned, their effects are more modest than the three principal regulators, but they are operative in certain physiologic conditions. And these may be utilized also in clinical conditions affecting the bone and the parathyroid gland. So these are other substances that may affect bone homeostasis, sodium, fluoride, certain drugs like your thiazides, no, if you recall, certain anti-epileptic drugs, no, and bisphosphonates, which we will discuss in a while. No? We go first to the principal regulators. No? The first one is parathyroid hormone, and the parathyroid hormone is a single-chain peptide hormone, and it is produced in the gland as a precursor, no? And prior to its secretion, um, certain part of the molecule, the 31 terminal amino acids, 31 of these amino acids are cleaved off, no, to produce the active enzyme, or the active hormone, no. Now, within the gland, the parathyroid gland is there's an enzyme which is a protease. It is a calcium-sensitive protease that is able to cleave off the hormone into fragments and thereby deactivating it. No? So this is one way by which calcium can regulate the production of parathyroid hormone, because whenever intracellular calcium increases in the glandular cell, then this protease is activated, no? And it will fragment the parathyroid hormone. There's a second mechanism by which calcium regulates the production and synthesis of parathyroid hormone, no? And this involves what we call the calcium sensing receptor, or calcium SR, no? Calcium sensing receptor, which when stimulated by calcium will reduce parathyroid production and secretion, no? So these are two of the mechanisms by which calcium will regulate the synthesis and production of parathyroid hormone. Now, the parathyroid hormone also contains the vitamin D receptor and the enzyme CYP27B1, no? And that produces CYP27B1 is the one that converts the liver precursor that is brought to the kidneys into calcitriol, no? And so this enables circulating or endogenously produced calcitriol to also suppress parathyroid production, no? Calcitriol will induce also the calcium-sensitive receptor to make the parathyroid gland more sensitive to the suppression effect of calcium. Okay. Now, the parathyroid hormone cannot be used therapeutically, no? Because the endogenously produced hormone is rapidly cleared, no, in a matter of minutes by the liver and the kidneys, no? So what we have will be synthetic analogs, no? So there is teriparatide, which is a fragment version of the long molecule, but it retains the activity of the parent molecule. And then we have long molecule analog versions like natpara and abaloparatide. And these synthetic analogs have been shown to have longer half-life in the serum, and they are more resistant to enzymatic action in the blood, no? So they have they have therapeutic value over the actual parathyroid hormone that our body produces. Now, parathyroid hormone, as I mentioned, regulates calcium and phosphate flow across membranes, no? Across cell membranes in the bone and kidneys, no? And through this mechanism, it leads to an increase in serum levels of calcium, and in the kidneys, a decrease in serum phosphate, no? So, in the bone, no, the effect is an increased activity of your osteoclast or resorption, no? Because although parathyroid hormone also stimulates bone formation, the net effect is a predominance of resorption, no? Through an increase in the activity of your osteoclast. So the parathyroid hormone, as mentioned, increases the ability and number of osteoclasts, which are the bone resorptive cells, no? But this is done indirectly because a parathyroid hormone will act on the osteoblast, no? The bone-forming cells, and it's the bone-forming cells or the osteoblast that induces or secretes and releases rank L, no, or the rank ligand. And as I mentioned, rank L acts on osteoclasts and osteoclast precursors and osteoclasts, increasing their differentiation, maturation, and activity. So, to promote the process of resorption, no, bone resorption. So, this substance is involved in the process which we call bone remodeling. No? So in bone remodeling, we first have bone resorption induced by or resulting from the action of your osteoclast, and this is eventually followed by osteoblastic bone formation. So that's the flow of bone remodeling. It starts first with osteoclast resorption, followed by osteoblast bone formation. Okay, now what is denosumab? Denosumab is a monoclonal antibody that is synthetic, and it's developed to counter or oppose the effect of RANKL. So this has a place in the treatment of several bone conditions, including osteoporosis. Okay. I mentioned earlier also that PTH inhibits the production and secretion of sclerostin by the osteocytes. No? So this blocks osteoblast proliferation and through inhibition of the WNT pathway. No? So there is an antibody again, a synthetic monoclonal antibody that has been developed, no? And this is romosozumab, which can inhibit sclerostin. So again, this is being tried in several clinical conditions. Now, we said that the PTH also directly and indirectly increases osteoblast proliferation, no? Which is the cells that are responsible for bone formation. Okay, but as I said, no, PTH will stimulate both the process of formation and the process of resorption. But the net effect of excess or high levels of endogenous PTH is one of bone resorption. However, if you administer low dose exogenous PTH intermittently, no, then this can stimulate bone formation without the bone having to go through the entire remodeling process. No? So dumediretso siya sa bone formation, and there's no bone resorption, no? When PTH is administered this way. And this might involve recruitment of other growth factors like insulin-like growth factor 1, and also involve the inhibition of osteocyte production of sclerostin. No? So PTH in the form of synthetic analogs like teriparatide or abaloparatide. Teriparatide, as I mentioned, is the fragment, the shorter molecule. Abaloparatide will be the full chain of synthetic parathyroid hormone, and they have been used in the treatment of osteoporosis. Now, in the kidneys, we know that parathyroid hormone stimulates calcitriol production, no? And increases the reabsorption of calcium and magnesium, but it reduces reabsorption of phosphate. No? So with the parathyroid, the effect on the kidneys is one that enhances the excretion of phosphate along with other substances like bicarbonate, some of your amino acids, sodium chloride, and sulfate. No? Now, the full-length parathyroid hormone like Natpara, which is similar to the abaloparatide that we mentioned in the previous slide, is used for the treatment of hypoparathyroidism because of this effect on the kidneys. No? Now, the next regulator is vitamin D. As you see, we have two sources of vitamin D. One from the sunlight, which is converted to cholecalciferol, and then this cholecalciferol is brought by the vitamin D binding protein into the dermal capillaries, and therefore it gains entry to the circulation. Another source will be from food, which of course this is absorbed from the intestine, but cholecalciferol is also present in many of the food that we take. So cholecalciferol and ergocalciferol, D3 and D2 respectively, are obtained from the diet. And here, upon absorption, they are incorporated into chylomicrons, which carry them into the blood. Now, ergocalciferol and cholecalciferol, once they are in the blood, these are brought to the liver. And in the liver, they are converted. The cytochrome CP450 group of enzyme will hydroxylate both D2 and D3 into the liver precursor of calcitriol that I was mentioning. So this is converted in the liver to 25-hydroxy D3, and 25-hydroxy D3 is brought into the kidneys where it is hydrolyzed into calcitriol. Now, these are the structures of D2 and D3. In terms of the their metabolism and their biologic activities, they're essentially the same. The only difference is that D2 has less affinity for vitamin D binding protein, and they have a shorter half-life. Now, these are vitamin D and its major metabolites and analogs, like calcifediol. This is the precursor in the liver. So D2 and D3 are brought to the liver and converted by CP450 to calcifediol. Calcifediol is brought to the kidneys where it is hydrolyzed by CP450 isomer, and converted into calcitriol. And then below are the various analogs of calcitriol, which will have clinical utility or which are being tried for various clinical conditions as well. So vitamin D binding protein, this is the protein that brings the D3 into the dermal capillaries. It has high affinity for 25-hydroxy vitamin D and 24-25 dihydroxy vitamin D. These are the precursor forms of calcitriol. With natural vitamin D, however, and calcitriol, they would have lower affinity. So the half-life of calcitriol will be a lot shorter than calcifediol. Calcifediol is may have a half-life of days, 23 days, whereas your calcitriol will only have a half-life of several hours. Okay, so it's very difficult to obtain the total level of the various metabolites and forms of vitamin D in the body because we have individual variations in terms of the amount of vitamin D binding protein we produce, and the affinity of each metabolite to the binding protein, no? Which is also variable. Now, these are your clearance and half-lives of the various vitamin D analogs. As I mentioned, if you look at this, your calcitriol will have a very short half-life, no? They are the half-life is only a few hours, no? Excess vitamin D is deposited in the fat cells, and basically it's mostly the liver that metabolizes this vitamin and its analogs, no? So this is what is the clinical relevance of the differential affinity to um, vitamin D binding proteins, no? Some of your calcitriol analogs will have very short half-lives, no, because they bind very poorly to vitamin D binding protein, no. So if they are used in treatment, it means that they have less hypercalcemic and hypercalciuric effects, no. So this particular kinetic feature makes them uh, uh, attractive options for certain clinical conditions. So this is the mechanism of calcitriol, no? So we know that this is the most potent stimulant of intestinal calcium and phosphate transport and bone resorption, no? So your calcitriol appears to induce the synthesis of new proteins, no? Your calcium binding protein in the intestine and an intestinal calcium channel, which is called the TRPV6, no? And it also is able to affect or influence calcium flow across the brush border and the basolateral membranes of intestinal cells, no? So, on the bone, however, the activity or the effect of calcitriol is more complex, no? It's not just mere enhancement of absorption that is seen in the intestine, no? In the bones, no? The effect is both direct and indirect, no? So, uh, uh, calcitriol kasi can induce rank L production in osteoblast, no? To regulate osteoclast activity, and this can affect the mineralization process of osteoblast, no? So what makes it complex is that calcitriol can, like parathyroid hormone, influence both formation and bone resorption, no? As we mentioned in the previous slides, no? Okay. Now, what about fibroblast growth factor 23, no? Now, FGF23 is a protein produced by the osteoblasts and osteoclasts, no? And they inhibit calcitriol production, no? And promote the excretion of phosphate in the urine, no? So, they enhance the loss of phosphate through the kidneys. So this is a table derived from the textbook, no? And this summarizes the action of the three main regulators on the gut. So how they affect absorption of calcium and phosphate, their effect on bone, whether they can enhance or inhibit um, the transport of calcium and phosphate from the bone tissue into the blood, and their effect on whether they favor reabsorption, retention, or excretion of calcium and phosphate, no? So this is also a very important table for us to be familiar with. Okay. Now we go to the secondary hormonal regulators. No? So we have first calcitonin. Calcitonin is a peptide that is formed by the parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland. No? So it's a single peptide, single chain peptide hormone. No? The human calcitonin molecule, however, has a very short half-life of only 10 minutes. So this limits its clinical utility. No? So what we use in for therapy of certain conditions will be the calcitonin derived from salmon, no, yung isda. Kasi salmon calcitonin has a half-life of as long as 50 minutes, no? So this is what is being used in certain clinical conditions, no? Now, calcitonin will mainly lower serum calcium and phosphate by its effect on bone, no? It blocks bone resorption. And in the kidneys, it blocks reabsorption of these two, no, as well as various other ions, no. So calcitonin reduces both calcium and phosphate reabsorption and the reabsorption of other ions as well, such as sodium, potassium, and magnesium, no. Now, calcitonin has been used in the treatment of Paget's disease, hypercalcemia, and of course, osteoporosis. Now, your steroids or glucocorticoids alter bone mineral homeostasis by opposing vitamin D stimulated intestinal calcium transport. No? It also stimulates renal calcium excretion. It can block bone formation, and at least in the initial, one of its initial effect is stimulation of bone resorption. No? So these will comprise all the mechanisms by which glucocorticoids on prolonged intake or prolonged use um, have or produce a negative effect on bone. No? Um, and but in certain conditions, no, even if they have this potentially detrimental effect on bone mineral density, in certain conditions, they're also quite useful. No? Like, for example, glucocorticoids have been used in reversing or resolving the hypercalcemia associated with malignancies like lymphoma, and granulomatous disease like sarcoidosis, no? Or in cases of vitamin D intoxication. So this is the reason why we should be very careful. One of the reasons why we should be very careful in prescribing systemic steroids, no? On prolonged basis, because this will have a detrimental effect on bone mineral density. Now, estrogen, no? Estrogen is a hormone that prevents bone loss, especially in the postmenopausal period, or especially in the immediate postmenopausal period, in which you have the fastest rate of bone loss. No? So estrogens are believed to have a direct effect on bone remodeling. No? And it is believed that the estrogens reduce the bone resorbing action of parathyroid hormone. No? Administration of estrogen brings about an increase in calcitriol levels in the blood, no? But in vitro, wala kang direct increased production of calcitriol induced by estrogen, no? Now, the increased calcitriol that is observed after estrogen treatment is believed to be because of decreased serum calcium and phosphate levels and increase in parathyroid. No? Now, estrogen also increases vitamin D binding protein production by the hepatocytes, no? So this leads to increase in the total concentration of vitamin D metabolites in the circulation. Estrogen receptors are also present in bone tissue, no? And therefore this is proof of its direct effect on bone remodeling, no? Now, it has been used for the prevention or mitigation of osteoporosis especially in peri and postmenopausal women, but currently it's not being used as widely as before because of the fears of cancer, no? It has been associated with the development of breast and uterine cancer, as well as the increase in incidence of cardiovascular events, no? However, we now have what you call the selective estrogen receptor modulators, or the SERMs, like raloxifene is an example. This will have all the benefits of the estrogens to which they are closely related to, but the SERMs will not have this association with these malignancies, no? Which became the issue against the use of estrogen for osteoporosis. Now, we have also the non-hormonal agents that affect bone mineral homeostasis, no? So, let's go to bisphosphonates. Bisphosphonates are pyrophosphate analogs, and as you see in the slide, they have many effects on bone mineral homeostasis, no? So they inhibit the recruitment and promote the apoptosis of osteoclasts, which are your bone resorting cells, no? Through blockade of this pathway, no? Of this enzyme, farnesyl synthase in the mevalonate pathway. And they also indirectly stimulate osteoblast activity, no? Now, biphosphonates inhibit the production of calcitriol, and it also inhibits intestinal calcium transport, no? And it can produce metabolic changes in both bone cells, like, for example, here it's inhibition of glycolysis, cell growth, elevation of acid and alkaline phosphatases, no? And this can be the reason behind the early cell death of osteoclast that is induced by enhanced by bisphosphonates, no? So currently, this is an alternative or an adjunct to estrogen treatment for postmenopausal osteoporosis, no? But it is also being used to counter malignant hypercalcemia or hypocalcemia result of malignancy and Paget's disease of the bone. Now, what are the adverse effects? Now, when a patient takes bisphosphonates orally, no, it is always good patient education to instruct the patient to remain in an upright position for at least 30 minutes after intake, no? Because this will reduce the risk of gastric and esophageal irritation, which can be significant, no? That's the main drawback of orally administered bisphosphonates. So, however, now there are parenteral treatment, no? Intermittent parenteral treatment using bisphosphonates if patients cannot tolerate the gastric effects, no? The gastric irritation effects. Now, this is osteonecrosis of the bone is a very rare but frightening adverse effects, no, with the use of bisphosphonates. But it's very uncommon, but if it does happen, it's usually secondary to high doses of bisphosphonates, like zoledronate, no, which is one prototype, no? This is a consequence of high intravenous doses of zoledronate. No? So, now, the injection or the intravenous administration of bisphosphonates can give some transient flu-like symptoms, no? So this is what you should tell your patients, but this is transient, no? Now, bisphosphonates, because they can be very effective, minsan sumusobra yung suppression nila ng bone turnover. So when the bone turnover suppression is excessive, this can lead to fractures also, like subtrochanteric femur fractures. So again, this is not a common event, no? But this is something to watch out for, no? With the use of bisphosphonates. Now, on the right are the prototypes. No? You might be familiar already with alendronate, risedronate, ibandronate. This has been used for the management also of osteoporosis. No? Now, we mentioned denosumab a while ago. It's a human monoclonal antibody which binds and inhibits the action of RANKL. No? So when RANKL is inhibited or suppressed, no, you effectively inhibit osteoclast formation and activity. No? So it inhibits bone resorption to a degree as effective as the bisphosphonates. No? But the difference is, whereas bisphosphonates can cause loss of resorptive function, the inhibited osteoclasts are still persistent, and bisphosphonates tend to deposit on bone tissue. Denosumab, the human monoclonal antibody, will not only block the osteocyte formation, but it also effectively kills the osteoclast. No? So it shortens rather survival of osteoclast. And the denosumab is not deposited in the bone. No? But their efficacy as far as inhibition of bone resorption is concerned will be about equal. Okay. Now, denosumab is given as a subcutaneous injection every 6 months, no? And it's pretty well tolerated. However, the book says there are 3 issues, no? One is the rank L is also expressed in other cells, not just the bone cells. So your immune cells also secrete rank L, and when denosumab binds to the rank L, it also inhibits and causes early cell death of immune cells, no? So that might make the patient prone to infection because you sort of dampen the immune response, no? And then, just like bisphosphonates, you can also have the rare complication of osteonecrosis of the jaw bones and subtrochanteric fractures, no? And it may also cause transient hypocalcemia. Now, denosumab is approved, however, even with patients with renal disease, no, because they are not cleared by the kidneys, no, and they do not deposit in the bone. So even in patients with compromised renal function, it's pretty safe to use denosumab, no? Okay. Now, Cinacalcet is the prototype of what we call your calcimimetics. No? Calcimimetics are drugs that activate the calcium sensing receptor that I mentioned a while ago. So it's like having the effect of calcium, di ba? When calcium is present at high levels inside the gland, no? The glandular cell, then this will stimulate the calcium sensitive receptor, and that will inhibit parathyroid production. So cinacalcet, that's why it's called the calcimimetic, will also activate calcium-sensitive receptor in the parathyroid cells and inhibit parathyroid hormone. So they are used to control the secondary hyperparathyroidism in patients who have chronic kidney disease and also in parathyroid gland carcinoma. Okay, we've talked about thiazides in the lecture of hypertension, and we know that thiazides decrease renal calcium excretion, no? And it enhances the parathyroid effects in stimulating calcium reabsorption in the distal collecting tubules, no? So the action is basically on calcium reabsorption by increasing sodium reabsorption in the proximal convoluted tubule. So this is how it enhances calcium reabsorption in the PCT. In the DCT, it enhances calcium reabsorption through the increasing parathyroid hormone effects. No? So this is used in hypercalciuria and also in the prevention of urinary stones. No? Okay, now your strontium ranelate. Strontium ranelate is a drug that blocks the differentiation of osteoclasts. No? And this has not been approved in the United States, but in Europe, this is used in the treatment of osteoporosis. No? So it promotes apoptosis or the early cell death of osteoclasts. It also promotes bone formation. So it protects against resorption and it promotes bone formation. And unlike the other substances, it increases bone formation markers. And it decreases resorption markers. So its action is on both on two mechanisms. It increases bone mineral density by inhibiting osteoclast and by promoting bone formation. And it is used for osteoporosis in Europe. Okay. So these are just some caveats in two common clinical conditions in which we use these agents. No? One is osteoporosis. So here, these are the various risk factors for osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is a state of decreased bone mineral density. No? And there's an imbalance in the bone remodeling process. You have more bone resorption than formation going on. And so individuals are at high risk for developing fractures. No? And we know that this fracture, especially in the elderly, this will greatly affect their quality of life. No? So these are the treatment options for osteoporosis. You have your bisphosphonates, the SERMs, no? Vitamin D plus calcium is used as an adjunct or supplement to the other treatments. So this is all already tabulated here. Summary of what we have mentioned. You have recombinant PTH like teriparatide, no? And then you have denosumab, which is as effective as your bisphosphonates, calcitonin, which is of much less efficacy, and then you have strontium ranelate, which is promotive of the bone formation and osteoclast death or osteoclast apoptosis. So in terms of their effects, we have grouped the various agents we discussed into this. No? You have inhibitors of bone resorption. No? These are the anti-resorptives. That's your bisphosphonates, calcitonin, your SERMs like raloxifene. Then you have stimulators of bone formation. You have your parathyroid hormone there and possibly fluoride. Then you have strontium ranelate and some of your active vitamin D metabolites, which have mixed mechanisms of action. And now it is part of good clinical practice to recommend for women, especially women who are in their perimenopause or menopausal stage, um, to take calcium and vitamin D, no? To reduce the risk for osteoporosis. Now, in chronic kidney disease, no, we know that because of failing renal function, there's also failure or inadequate or deficient calcitriol production. And as a consequence, there is retention of phosphate and a reduction in serum calcium levels. No? So there's secondary hyperparathyroidism, and the secondary parahyperthyroidism is a compensatory response of the parathyroid gland to low levels of serum calcium, no, that occurs in CKD. No? Additionally, in the early part of CKD, your FGF23 also begins to elevate, and this will further worsen the deficiency of calcitriol production. So here we give vitamin D and calcitriol. So these are the various drugs that are used for bone conditions. Thank you very much.